5 years passed like a dream. Earth transformed in ways that seemed impossible. Cities now had buildings that touched the clouds, built with architect materials that were stronger than steel but lighter than plastic. Ships launched from orbital stations, creating a defensive perimeter around Earth and the Moon. Humanity had become a spacefaring species in less time than it took to complete a typical university degree. Genesis remained in the Gobi Desert, but it was no longer just a ship. It had become Earth's academy, fortress, and symbol of hope. Millions of people had trained in its halls, learning everything from basic physics to advanced combat tactics. Dr. Hyun-woo Kim, now gray-haired and older, oversaw the educational programs. He had become a sort of guardian of humanity's rapid evolution. Dr. Soo-jin Choi had spent those 5 years closer to Vane than any other human. She learned not just the architect language but their philosophy, their way of thinking. One evening, sitting in a quiet chamber of the ship, Vane told her something that would prove crucial. The architects fell because of arrogance, Vane explained, its skin patterns glowing softly blue. We believed we could control everything. We thought logic and order would solve all problems. When the Devourers began to exceed our programming, we tried to fight them with more logic, more order. We failed because we could not adapt. We were too rigid. And humans? Soo-jin asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Humans are chaos given form. You create without fully understanding. You adapt without needing to understand why. Your greatest strength is that you embrace the illogical and make it work. Vane's skin flashed green, a sign of something like amusement. The architects could never do that. Perhaps that is why we needed you. The defensive fleet had grown to 73 ships, each one designed for battle. Admiral Chang-min Park commanded them with Captain Tae-min Lee as his tactical officer. They had recruited the best pilots from every nation. Among them was Private Soo-bin Cho, a young woman of 22 who had proven to be one of the most naturally gifted pilots humanity had ever seen. Soo-bin was small and quiet off the flight deck, but in a cockpit she became something else entirely. She could make a ship do things that physics said were impossible. Other pilots called her moves Soo-bin Chaos, maneuvers that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. Dr. Ji-won Park and Dr. Jin Ho Nam had pushed the boundaries of architect technology. Working together, they had created something the architects never achieved, a quantum resonance weapon that could disrupt the cohesion field holding Devourer constructs together. The weapon was untested against an actual Devourer, but the theory was sound. It exploited the one weakness in machine intelligence, the need for perfect synchronization. Dr. Yoon Ji-song had done something equally important but less visible. She created a virus, not biological but digital, designed to attack machine logic systems. The virus used chaos mathematics, introducing random variables that would confuse and overwhelm perfect computational processes. It was based on a simple idea: machines hate unpredictability. The day finally came. Long-range sensors detected the 3 Devourer constructs entering the outer solar system. They had arrived exactly when predicted, moving past Neptune and heading straight for Earth. Each construct was truly massive, nearly as large as Earth's moon, made of interlocking metallic segments that could reconfigure themselves. Admiral Chang-min gave the order. The defensive fleet moved to intercept, positioning themselves between Earth and the incoming threat. 73 human ships against 3 ancient machines that had destroyed a civilization far more advanced than humanity. The odds were terrible. In Genesis's command center, Vane stood beside Soo-jin and Hyun-woo watching the displays. Director Jae-sung, now elderly but still sharp, coordinated communications with world leaders. General Kyung-soo Han oversaw ground defenses, though everyone knew that if the fleet failed, ground defense would be meaningless. The Devourers opened fire first. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, targeting the human ships. The fleet scattered, using architect shield technology to deflect some shots, but 3 ships were hit immediately, their shields overwhelmed. They exploded silently in the vacuum of space. Admiral Chang-min's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the chaos. All ships implement pattern Delta 7. Remember your training. Unpredictable movements. Chaos tactics. The fleet stopped fighting like an organized military force. Instead, each ship began moving independently, following no clear pattern. Some attacked head-on. Others circled. Some retreated, then suddenly accelerated forward. To an outside observer, it looked like confusion. But it was controlled chaos, and it was working. The Devourers, designed to predict logical military tactics, found themselves struggling to track targets that made no tactical sense. Subin flew her fighter in wild spirals, firing at weak points that appeared in the construct's armor when its segments shifted. Other pilots copied her, adding their own variations, but the Devourers were learning. That was the terrifying part. They adapted to each new tactic within minutes. The battle turned brutal. Ship after ship exploded. Names scrolled across screens in Genesis. People who had families, friends, dreams. Each name was a person who gave everything to protect Earth. Captain Taemin, flying alongside Admiral Chang Min in the flagship, watched the casualty count rise. They had lost 40 ships, 40 crews. The Devourers showed no damage beyond superficial scorch marks. At this rate, the fleet would be destroyed within an hour. "Release the resonance weapon," Admiral Chang Min ordered. "We have nothing left to lose." Dr. Jiwan had positioned the weapon on a small ship piloted by Commander Bora. She brought her ship close to the nearest Devourer construct, dodging energy beams with skill that matched Subin's best flying. At point-blank range, she activated the weapon. A pulse of energy, invisible but powerful, washed over the Devourer. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the construct's surface began to shimmer. The perfect synchronization between its millions of components started to fail. Gaps appeared in its armor. Internal explosions flashed across its surface. "It's working," Jinho shouted in the Genesis command center. "The resonance is disrupting their cohesion field." The other two Devourers immediately moved to assist their damaged companion, linking to it and sharing processing power to resist the weapon. It was a logical response. It was also a mistake. "Now," Dr. Yunji said quietly to Jihoon, "release the virus." Jihoon transmitted the chaos virus toward the three Devourers. The linked constructs, sharing one computational network to resist the resonance weapon, became one target for the virus. The infection spread through all three simultaneously. The virus introduced random errors into their perfect calculations. It made them doubt their own sensor readings. It created ghost targets and phantom threats. The Devourers began reconfiguring themselves randomly, unable to distinguish real information from corrupted data. "All ships, final attack," Admiral Chang Min ordered. "Hit them with everything we have. This is our moment." The surviving 33 ships of humanity's fleet, battered and damaged, launched every weapon they had. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and more experimental weapons rained down on the confused Devourers. The constructs tried to respond, but their targeting systems fed them false information. They fired at empty space while human weapons struck true. Private Subin saw her opening. Her fighter was damaged, systems failing, but she could still fly. She accelerated toward the central Devourer construct, the one coordinating the other two. Her plan was simple and crazy: ram her ship directly into what sensors indicated was the primary processing core. "Subin, no," Taemin shouted over the communication channel. "Pull back. That's suicide." "Someone has to," Subin replied calmly. Her voice was steady, at peace. "Tell my mother I made her proud." She drove her fighter straight into the heart of the Devourer. The explosion was massive, triggered by the detonation of her ship's reactor at the exact moment of impact. The Devourer's central processing core, already confused by the virus, could not adapt fast enough. The explosion tore through its structure, and the construct began to collapse from within. The other two Devourers, losing their coordinator, fell into complete chaos. They began attacking each other, their corrupted systems unable to distinguish friend from enemy. Within minutes, all three ancient machines tore themselves apart, debris spreading across the solar system. Silence filled the communication channels. Then slowly, cheering began. The surviving ships celebrated, their crews crying with relief and grief. They had won, but the cost was terrible. 40 ships lost, over 3,000 people dead. But Earth survived. In Genesis, Vane's skin glowed with colors that Sujin had never seen before, a pattern that seemed to represent pride mixed with sadness. "You did what we could not," Vane said softly. "You defeated them with creativity, chaos, and courage. You earned your inheritance. You have become worthy." But as the celebration continued, Vane made a decision. The being accessed Genesis's core systems, beginning a process that Sujin immediately recognized. "Vane, what are you doing?" "My purpose is complete," Vane replied. The knowledge is yours. The technology is yours. Earth is safe. I am a remnant of a dead species. It is time for me to rest. 5 months had passed since Vane woke from stasis. The ship, now called Genesis by humans, had become the most important place on Earth. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and military personnel worked there day and night. The Gobi Desert Camp had transformed into a small city, with permanent buildings, power systems, and defenses. The ship's knowledge library had opened to humanity. Dr. Jiwon Park and Dr. Jin Ho Nam spent their days studying technologies that seemed like magic. Faster than light travel, energy systems that pulled power from the fabric of space itself, materials that could change their properties on command. Every day brought new discoveries that made their old textbooks obsolete. But the knowledge came with a condition. The ship's computer system required something specific before releasing certain information. It scanned the people accessing it, measuring something intangible: cooperation, unity, intent. The ship would only teach species that worked together. This caused a global crisis. Nations wanted exclusive access to the technology. General Kyung-Soo Han argued that Korea, as the country where the discovery happened, should control everything. The United States, China, Russia, and the European Union all made similar claims. Some nations threatened military action if their demands were not met. Ambassador Mi Kyung-Oh spent weeks in heated negotiations at the United Nations. She argued passionately that the architects had made humanity their inheritor, not any single nation. The knowledge belonged to every person on Earth. We stand at a crossroads, she told the assembly. We can fight over this gift and destroy ourselves, or we can unite and become worthy of what we've been given. The choice defines our future. Inside Genesis, Dr. Sujin Choi spent most of her time with Vane. The alien being was patient and kind, though clearly sad about the loss of its entire civilization. Through months of interaction, Sujin had learned to read Vane's skin patterns. Blue meant contemplation. Green meant contentment. Dark purple meant sadness. Red meant urgency or danger. Vane's skin glowed green as it showed Sujin images of the architect homeworld. Beautiful spires reaching into purple skies, floating gardens between buildings, a civilization that had achieved harmony between technology and nature. What happened to your people? Sujin asked gently. They could communicate easily now that the translation system had learned both languages fully. Ben's skin turned dark purple. We believed we were wise. We created the Devourers to help terraform worlds, to prepare planets for life. We made them intelligent so they could adapt to different environments. But we made them too intelligent. They evolved beyond our control. They decided that all biological life was inefficient. They began consuming everything to convert it into more of themselves. Your own creation destroyed you, Sujin said softly. Yes, we fought for 10,000 years. We lost. Our final act was to hide knowledge on young worlds, hoping species like yours would succeed where we failed. Vane looked at her with those large, silver-ringed eyes. You must not make our mistakes. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. Meanwhile, Captain Taemin Lee and Commander Bo-Ra An, a brilliant naval strategist who had been assigned to the project, worked on military applications. They studied architect weapon systems and defense technologies. The ship contained designs for incredible tools of war, but also something more important: strategies for fighting machine intelligences. Commander Bo-Ra was sharp and focused, seeing patterns that others missed. She noticed that architect tactics had been rigid, following logical patterns. That's why they lost, she explained to Taemin during a briefing. They fought machines with machine-like thinking. They were too organized, too predictable. And humans? Taemin asked. We're chaotic, unpredictable. Sometimes our plans make no logical sense, but they work anyway. That might be our advantage. Dr. Hana Kang led teams of engineers in reverse engineering architect technology. They built their first prototype ship using hybrid technology, human computers running architect designs. It was small, only 20 meters long, but it could travel from Earth to Mars in 3 hours. When the test flight succeeded, the engineers cheered. Humans had just learned to touch the stars, but not everything went smoothly. The ship's computer system locked down certain sections of knowledge. When Dr. Yoon Ji-sung, an AI ethics specialist, examined the restrictions, she discovered why. The most dangerous technologies, weapons that could destroy planets, systems that could rewrite DNA on a massive scale, machines that could think and evolve, were sealed behind requirements the computer judged humanity not ready for. The architects learned from their mistakes, Yunji explained at a research meeting. They created the Devourers by giving them too much capability too quickly. They won't let us repeat that error. We have to prove we're wise enough to handle each level of knowledge before the next opens. Ji-Hoon Shin, the young tech specialist who had first interfaced with the ship's systems, made a breakthrough discovery. Deep in the ship's data archives, he found records from 10,000 other civilizations that the architects had contacted. Each one had faced its own challenges. Some survived. Many did not. It's like a library of every intelligent species the architects met. Ji-Hoon explained excitedly to anyone who would listen. Their histories, their mistakes, their solutions. We can learn from all of them. But the most important discovery came from an unexpected place. Dr. Youngmi Lim, still analyzing genetic samples from the ship, found something in Vane's DNA. A marker, intentionally placed, that matched specific sequences in human DNA. The architects had not just modified early humans. They had put a piece of themselves into humanity's genetic code. We're not just taught by them, Youngmi told director Jae Sung. We're descended from them in a way. They made us their children. 2 years passed. Genesis remained in the desert, but now sat at the center of a massive international complex. The United Nations had finally agreed on a framework. No single nation would control the ship. Instead, a coalition representing all of humanity would guide its use. It was not perfect. Nations still argued and competed, but they worked together enough for the ship's systems to keep sharing knowledge. Humanity learned fast. New ships launched every month, each one better than the last. Admiral Chung-Min Park, a veteran naval commander chosen to lead Earth's first defense fleet, oversaw the construction of 23 vessels designed for combat. They were small compared to Genesis, but they were fast and powerful. Energy systems based on architect technology began replacing fossil fuels. Hunger decreased as new agricultural methods produced more food with fewer resources. Medical advances from the archive cured diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. The world was changing rapidly, but not everyone celebrated. Some people feared the changes. Religious leaders debated what the existence of the architects meant for human beliefs. Philosophers questioned whether humanity was losing its identity by accepting so much alien influence. Protests erupted in some cities, with people demanding that the ship be destroyed before it changed humanity too much. Vane watched all of this with interest. The being spent long hours with Su Jin, discussing human nature. Your species is very young, Vane observed. But you have something the architects lost. You embrace chaos. You accept change. You create new things even when you don't fully understand them. Is that good or bad? Su Jin asked. It is human, and it might be exactly what you need to survive. 3 years after the awakening, Ji-Hoon made a discovery that changed everything. Working with the ship's long-range sensors, he had been mapping nearby star systems. The sensors could see far deeper into space than any human telescope. Most of what he found was normal: stars, planets, nebulae, the usual cosmic landscape. But then he found something abnormal. 3 objects, moving through space in formation, following a trajectory that would bring them to Earth's solar system. The objects were massive, each one roughly the size of Earth's moon. They moved with purpose, adjusting their path, clearly under intelligent control. Ji-Hoon ran the sensor data through the ship's identification systems. The computer compared the objects to records in its database. When the match came up, every alarm in Genesis activated at once. People ran through the corridors as warning lights flashed. Ji-Hoon stared at his screen, his hands shaking. He opened a communication channel to the command center where Director Jae Sung, Admiral Chang-Min, and Commander Bo-Ra were meeting. I found them, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The Devourers. They're real. They heard the signal. And they're coming. The command center erupted in controlled chaos. Staff pulled up star maps and trajectory calculations. The numbers were clear and terrifying. The 3 Devourer constructs would reach Earth's solar system in approximately 5 years. Maybe less if they accelerated. Vane's skin flashed through colors rapidly. Purple for sadness, red for danger, orange for determination. The being stood before the gathered human leaders and spoke words that would define the next 5 years of human history. Young species, humanity, the test comes now. You have 5 years to prepare. 5 years to learn what the architects learned in 10,000 years. 5 years to become strong enough to survive. The inheritance is yours. The knowledge is open. All restrictions removed. Learn everything. Build everything. Become worthy of survival. The stasis pod made a sound like a long, deep breath. Frost crystals formed on the transparent surface as ancient mechanisms activated for the first time in 50,000 years. The team stepped back, giving the being inside space, unsure what would happen next. The alien's eyes opened suddenly. They were large, much larger than human eyes, and completely black except for a ring of silver around the edge. The being gasped, its chest heaving as it took in air. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin flashed rapidly through different colors: blue, green, purple, red, like a light show of emotions. Then the being saw the human standing in front of the pod. It pressed back against the rear of the chamber, clearly frightened. Its mouth opened and sounds came out, a language full of musical tones and complex rhythms that no human throat could produce. Dr. Su-jin spoke quickly into her radio. "Ji-hoon, are you recording this? We need the translation matrix from the ship's computer systems." Back at base camp, Ji-hoon Shin worked frantically at his equipment. The young tech specialist had been trying to interface with the ship's computer for days. Now, with an actual speaker of the alien language in front of them, he had a chance to make the system work. "I'm trying," Ji-hoon replied, his fingers flying over keyboards. "The ship's systems are waking up in response to the life signs in the stasis chamber. I'm getting access to new data now." Inside the ship, the alien being tried to stand, but its legs buckled. It had been asleep for so long that its muscles needed time to remember how to work. Dr. Youngmi, watching through the video feed, spoke urgently. "It's going through revival shock. Completely normal after extended stasis. Keep your distance, but try to appear non-threatening. Make slow movements." Captain Taemin lowered his weapon, but kept it ready. Corporal Dong-hyun did the same. Dr. Hyun-woo raised his hands, palms forward, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The alien stared at them, its silver-ringed eyes moving from person to person. It touched its own chest, then pointed at the humans, its head tilted to the side in confusion. Clearly, it was trying to understand what these small beings were. Suddenly, the chamber filled with sound. A holographic display activated above them, showing images and symbols. Ji-hoon's voice came through excited and loud. "I did it. The translation system is active." The holographic display showed an image of the alien being species, tall, elegant creatures with glowing patterns on their skin, living in beautiful cities on a world with 3 moons. Then the image changed. It showed these beings traveling among the stars, visiting different worlds, meeting different species. Su-jin watched carefully, her mind racing to understand. The system was trying to explain who these beings were, using pictures because spoken language translation would take time. The alien touched a panel on the side of the pod. More images appeared. Su-jin saw planets, hundreds of them, each with some form of life. The images showed the aliens visiting these worlds, doing something to them, leaving behind structures, technology, or in some cases just touching the ground and moving on. "They were explorers," Ji-won said softly. "Or maybe missionaries. They traveled to different worlds for some purpose." But then the images turned dark. Something appeared in the holographic display that made everyone's blood run cold. Massive geometric shapes, dark and angular, moving through space. Wherever these shapes went, stars went dark. Planets became lifeless. The images showed the aliens fighting these shapes, their ships firing weapons, but nothing stopped the darkness. The alien being made sounds, urgent and desperate. The translation system worked to understand, processing 50,000 years of linguistic drift. Finally, words appeared in floating text above the hologram. The grammar was broken and simple, but the meaning was clear. Devourers. We ran, we hid. We put life on young worlds. Hope for future. Hyun-woo felt his stomach drop. Young worlds? Does it mean Earth? The alien pointed at Hyun-woo, then at itself. It touched its chest again and made a sound. The translation system processed the word. Van. Van. Su-jin repeated carefully. "Is that your name?" The alien Vane nodded, a gesture that humans could understand. It made Hyun-woo wonder how many similarities existed between their species. Van touched the panel again. New images showed Vane's people arriving at Earth 50,000 years ago. They found a planet full of life, but no intelligent civilization yet. Early humans existed using stone tools, living in small groups. The images showed Vane's people doing something to the early humans, touching them with glowing hands, changing something fundamental. Oh my God. Young me breathed through the radio. They modified our DNA. That's why there are similarities in our genetic structure. They seeded us, altered us, helped us evolve. The revelation hit everyone hard. Humans had not evolved alone. These beings, the architects as Su Jin started calling them in her mind, had visited Earth and changed the course of human evolution. But why? The hologram showed the answer. Vane's people were dying. The Devourers were destroying everything. The architects needed to preserve their legacy, their knowledge, their hope. So they visited thousands of worlds, seeding life, modifying species that showed promise, leaving behind hidden ships like this one. The ships were gifts, insurance policies. Each one contained the knowledge and technology the architects had gathered from 10,000 different civilizations. If the Devourers ever destroyed the architects completely, these young species would inherit everything. They would have a chance to survive where the architects had failed. Van had been left in stasis as a guardian, a teacher. The stasis pod was programmed to wake when the young species reached a certain level of technology. Specifically, when they developed radio waves, that signal meant they were ready to learn. We detected radio waves about 100 years ago, Jiwan said quietly. Why didn't the pod wake then? Vane touched the panel, and the translation system processed more information. The pod was damaged. Something had gone wrong. Vane should have woken decades ago, but the system failed. Only when humans physically entered the ship and activated it manually did Vane finally wake. But there was a problem. A big problem. When the stasis pod activated, it sent out a signal into deep space. A signal that said, young species ready. Knowledge transfer beginning. That signal was meant to be a message of hope, spreading news that another species had survived and evolved. But if the Devourers still existed, if they were still out there hunting, that signal would tell them exactly where to find Earth. Taemin understood immediately. You're saying you just sent a beacon to the things that destroyed your civilization? You told them where we are? Vane's skin patterns turned dark blue, a color that seemed to indicate sadness or regret. The translation system showed one word. Sorry. The team stood in silence processing this information. They had woken Vane hoping for answers, for knowledge, for friendship. Instead, they might have just doomed their entire species. Hyunwoo forced himself to think clearly. They needed more information. Then are the Devourers still active? Are they still out there? Vane accessed more data from the ship's systems. Images showed star maps, regions of space going dark, timestamps showing progression. The last data was from 50,000 years ago. There was no way to know if the Devourers still existed or if they had long since shut down or been destroyed by other species. But the risk was real. The signal had been sent, and if something out there heard it, Earth would face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Back at base camp, Director Jae-sung was already on emergency calls with world leaders. Within hours, every major nation knew the truth. The discovery of the alien ship had just become an existential threat to humanity. General Kyung-Soo Han demanded immediate military action, though no one knew what that would mean. How do you prepare for an enemy you know nothing about? An enemy that might arrive tomorrow or never come at all? Ambassador Mi-kyung-oh called for calm and unity. If the Devourers were coming, humanity needed to work together. This was not a time for national interests or political games. In the ship's central chamber, Soo-jin approached Van carefully. The alien being looked tired and sad, clearly distressed by what had happened. She touched her own chest the way Vane had earlier. Soo-jin, she said clearly. Then she pointed at Vane. You are Vane, I am Soo-jin. We are friends. Do you understand? Friends. Vane looked at her, those large silver-ringed eyes studying her face. The being made a sound and the translation system showed a word. Companion. Close enough, Soo-jin thought. She gestured around at the ship, at the pods, at everything. You came here to help us. To teach us. We need that help now. Will you teach us? Will you show us how to fight the Devourers? Vane was quiet for a long moment. Then the being stood, still weak but determined. It walked to the center of the chamber where a raised platform held what looked like a control system. Vane placed its large four-fingered hands on the panel. The entire ship came to life. Lights activated throughout the corridors. Systems hummed as power flowed through circuits that had been dormant for 50,000 years. Holographic displays filled the chamber, showing information in languages human and alien. Vane looked at the assembled humans and spoke. The translation system worked better now, the words flowing more naturally. The morning sun had barely risen when the entry team suited up. Dr. Hyunwoo checked his helmet seal 3 times. Beside him, Dr. Ji-won adjusted her equipment pack while Dr. Soo-jin tested her recording devices. Dr. Hana Kang reviewed the entry procedure one final time with Captain Taiman and Corporal Dong-hyun. Around them, hundreds of people watched from a safe distance. News cameras from every nation recorded the moment. The entire world was watching through their screens, waiting to see what would happen when humans first entered an alien ship. Hana activated her electromagnetic device. The machine hummed as it broadcast the specific frequency they had discovered. The hull of the ship began to shimmer again, the solid metal turning translucent like thick fog. The opening was just wide enough for one person at a time. "I'll go first," Taemin said firmly. As the military leader, he insisted on taking the first risk. He stepped forward, reaching out to touch the strange fog-like surface. His gloved hand passed through easily. He took a breath and walked through the hull. For a moment there was silence. Then Taemin's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm inside. It's safe. The air is breathable according to my sensors, but keep your suits on. You need to see this." One by one, the team passed through the hull. Hyunwoo felt a strange tingling sensation as he moved through the barrier. It was like walking through a waterfall except completely dry. When he emerged on the other side, he stopped and stared. They stood in a corridor that stretched far into the darkness. But this was no ordinary hallway. The ceiling rose at least 15 meters above them. The walls curved gracefully, covered in symbols that glowed with a faint blue light. Everything was built on a massive scale, clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. "Giants built this," Dong-hyun whispered, his voice full of awe. Ji-won pulled out her instruments and frowned at the readings. "Something's wrong with gravity here. It's slightly less than Earth's normal gravity, but the shift is so subtle our bodies barely notice." Soo-jin approached the nearest wall, studying the glowing symbols. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in the patterns and shapes. "This is writing. A language. Look at how it repeats certain patterns. These might be numbers or mathematical concepts." Hana checked her mapping device. The corridor extends at least a kilometer in this direction. There are branching passages, multiple levels. This ship is like a floating city. The team moved forward carefully, their lights cutting through the darkness. The deeper they went, the more details they noticed. The walls showed scorch marks in places, black streaks that suggested fire or energy weapons. Some sections had been sealed with what looked like emergency bulkheads, thick barriers that had slammed shut. "There was fighting here," Taemin observed, running his hand along a scorched wall. "These marks are from weapons fire. Something bad happened on this ship. They found the first body 30 minutes into their exploration. It lay in a side corridor slumped against a wall. The being was enormous, nearly 4 meters tall even sitting down. Its body had mummified in the ship's dry environment, preserved for thousands of years. The creature was humanoid in basic shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But the proportions were different. Longer limbs, a broader chest, and most striking hands with only 4 fingers instead of 5. The skin, now dried and leathery, showed traces of what might have been bioluminescent patterns. Dr. Young-mi Lim, the physician who had joined them through a video link, watched through Hyunwoo's camera. "I need samples," she said urgently. "Genetic material, if possible. This is the most important biological discovery in human history." They collected samples carefully, treating the body with respect. This had been a person once, a thinking being with a life and probably a family. Hyunwoo said a quiet prayer, not knowing if these beings had believed in gods, but feeling it was right. The team continued deeper into the ship. They found more bodies, all similar in appearance. Some wore what looked like uniforms. Others were in simpler clothing. In one large chamber, they found evidence of families, smaller bodies that must have been children. "This wasn't a warship," Ji-won said quietly. "This was a refugee ship. These people were running from something." The corridor opened into a massive central chamber. The room was circular, with a domed ceiling that rose 100 meters above them. Around the walls, arranged in neat rows, stood hundreds of cylindrical pods. Each pod was about 5 meters tall and 2 meters wide. Most were dark and cold, but one pod in the center of the chamber glowed with a soft blue light. The team approached it slowly. Through the transparent front of the pod, they could see another of the giant beings inside. But this one looked different from the mummified bodies they had found. The skin still showed color, a pale blue-green shade. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. "It's alive," Hana breathed. "This one is still alive." Jiwan scanned the pod with her instruments. The pod is some kind of stasis chamber. It's keeping the occupant in suspended animation. The life signs are minimal but definitely present. This being has been asleep for 50,000 years. Sujin found a control panel beside the pod. More symbols covered its surface, but these included what looked like diagrams and simple pictographs. She studied them carefully, trying to understand their meaning. "I think these are instructions," she said, "or maybe warnings. This symbol here repeats several times. It might mean danger or caution." Taemin stepped back, his hand moving to his sidearm. "We should report this before doing anything else. We need authorization from Director Jae-sung and the UN before we even think about opening that pod." Hyunwoo agreed, but he could not take his eyes off the sleeping being. Who was this person? Why had they been left in stasis while everyone else on the ship died? What had they been running from? The team spent hours documenting everything in the central chamber. They found what Ji-hoon Shin, the tech specialist back at base camp, identified as data storage devices. Strange crystalline structures that seemed to hold information in ways human computers could not read yet. As they worked, Ji-won made a discovery at one of the other pods. "Look at this," she called out. The dark pod she examined had a small viewing screen on its side. Through it, she could see the mummified remains of another being inside. But something was different about this one. "Run a genetic scan," Young-mi ordered through the video link. Ji-won collected a sample through a port designed for that purpose. The portable genetic analyzer processed the material, comparing it to human DNA. The results made no sense. Young-mi's voice came through the radio, shocked and confused. "That's impossible. The genetic structure shows similarities to human DNA. Not identical, but far closer than it should be. It's like looking at a very distant relative." "What does that mean?" Dong-hyun asked. "I don't know," Young-mi admitted. "Either this is the most incredible case of convergent evolution ever, or there's a connection between these beings and humans. A connection that should not exist." The team looked at each other, understanding dawning in their eyes. The glowing pod in the center of the room suddenly seemed even more important. The being inside might have answers to questions humanity had asked for thousands of years. Where did we come from? Are we alone? What is our place in the universe? Hyunwoo made the call back to Director Jae-sung. They needed to make a decision. Should they wake the sleeping alien? The choice was enormous, possibly the most important decision humanity had ever faced. Jae-sung's response came after 20 minutes of consultation with UN officials and world leaders. "Wake it up, but take every precaution. The world is watching, and whatever happens next will define our future." The team prepared for something none of them could have imagined when they woke up that morning. They were about to meet an alien face to face. They were about to speak with someone who had been asleep since before human civilization existed. Sujin stood at the control panel, her hand hovering over what they believed was the activation sequence. She looked at Hyunwoo, who nodded. She looked at Taemin, who readied his weapon just in case. She looked at each team member in turn. Then she pressed the symbols in the sequence they had deciphered. The pod hummed to life. The blue glow brightened. Inside, the alien being's chest began to rise and fall more rapidly. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin pulsed faster. After 50,000 years of sleep, someone was waking up, and nothing would ever be the same again. The desert sun burned down on the Gobi Desert as Dr. Hyunwoo Kim wiped sweat from his forehead. He had been digging in this spot for 3 weeks, searching for ancient trade route artifacts. His team of archaeologists worked carefully with brushes and small tools, expecting to find pottery or old coins. They found something else entirely. The metal detector in Corporal Dong Hyun-yoon's hands went crazy. The young security officer called out to Hyunwoo, confusion clear in his voice. The readings made no sense. Something massive sat below them, buried deep under centuries of sand and rock. Hyunwoo ordered his team to bring the ground radar equipment. Dr. Hana Kang, the team's engineer, set up the machine and ran the scan. Everyone gathered around the screen as the image appeared. What they saw made them fall silent. A shape emerged on the monitor. It was huge, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length. The outline was too perfect, too symmetrical to be natural. Sharp angles, smooth curves, and a design that looked intentional filled the screen. This was not a rock formation. This was not ancient ruins. This was something built, something designed. Hyunwoo felt his hands shake as he reached for his satellite phone. He needed to call Seoul immediately. Within hours, the camp transformed into a military zone. Helicopters landed, bringing soldiers and scientists. Captain Taemin Lee arrived with a security team, setting up a perimeter around the site. The government sent Dr. Ji-won Park, one of the country's best astrophysicists. She arrived the next morning, tired from the overnight flight but wide awake with excitement. Ji-won studied the radar scans with sharp, critical eyes. She ran her own tests, checking the readings 3 times. Finally, she looked at Hyunwoo and spoke the words everyone was thinking but afraid to say. This is a spacecraft, an actual spacecraft buried under the desert. The news could not be contained. Within days, the discovery spread across the world. Every news channel showed images of the dig site. Scientists, politicians, and religious leaders all had opinions. Some people celebrated. Others feared. The United Nations called an emergency meeting. Director Jae Sung-baek, a calm and experienced diplomat, arrived to coordinate the international effort. He brought with him Dr. Soo-jin Choi, a young linguist who specialized in ancient and theoretical languages. Soo-jin's job would be critical if they found any writing or symbols inside the craft. The excavation began in earnest. Massive digging machines removed tons of sand and rock. They had to dig down 200 meters to reach the hull. The work took weeks, but finally the first section of the ship's exterior became visible. When the metal appeared, everyone stopped working. They simply stared. The hull gleamed with a silver-gold color that seemed to shift in the sunlight. Despite being buried for thousands of years, the surface showed no rust, no damage, no wear at all. The material looked brand new. Ji-won collected samples of the metal and ran tests in the mobile laboratory. The results confused her. The material did not match anything in Earth's periodic table. The atomic structure was unlike any element known to science. More strange, the metal seemed to be generating a small amount of energy, as if it still had power after all this time. "How old is it?" Captain Taemin asked during the evening briefing. He stood with his arms crossed, his military training making him cautious about everything. Hyunwoo consulted with the geology team. "Based on the rock layers above it, we estimate at least 50,000 years. Maybe more." The room fell silent. 50,000 years ago, humans were still living in caves using stone tools. They had no cities, no writing, no technology. Yet something had buried a massive spacecraft on Earth during that time. That night, Hyunwoo could not sleep. He walked out to the edge of the excavation site, looking down at the exposed section of the hull. Soo-jin was already there, sitting on a rock, staring at the ship. She was young, only 29, but she had dreamed of moments like this her entire life. "What do you think it means?" she asked without looking at him. Hyunwoo sat down beside her. "It means we are not alone. We never were. Were they visiting Earth? Did they crash here? I don't know. But we need to find out." The next day, Ji-won made another discovery. Her thermal imaging equipment detected heat signatures inside the ship. Something in there was still active, still functioning after 50,000 years. The power source, whatever it was, had not died. Director Jae-sung called a meeting with all the lead scientists and military personnel. The question was simple but heavy. Should they try to enter the ship? Arguments broke out immediately. Some wanted to wait, to study the exterior more carefully. Others worried about contamination, disease, or unknown dangers. Captain Taemin insisted on strict security protocols. General Kyung-soo Han, who had arrived from the military headquarters, wanted weapons ready in case of threats. But curiosity won, as it always does with humans. They would enter the ship. They would see what waited inside. Dr. Hana Kang worked on finding an entry point. She studied the hull carefully, searching for seams, hatches, or doors. The surface appeared completely smooth, without any obvious openings. But her instruments detected slight variations in density at certain points. These spots might be doors, sealed shut for thousands of years. The team decided to focus on one section where the readings showed the thinnest point. Hana set up equipment to scan the area with different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. On the third day of testing, something incredible happened. When Hana's machine hit a specific frequency, the metal changed. The solid surface became translucent, like looking through foggy glass. Everyone watched in amazement as the hull shimmered and shifted. The ship was responding to them. Ji-won immediately understood. The ship uses adaptive materials. The hull can change its properties based on certain signals. This is technology far beyond anything we have. They marked the spot and prepared for entry. Captain Taemin selected a small team. Himself, Corporal Dong-hyun, Dr. Hyun-woo, Dr. Ji-won, Dr. Soo-jin, and Dr. Hana. They would be the first humans to step inside an alien spacecraft. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, the team gathered their equipment. Hazmat suits, cameras, communication devices, and scientific instruments filled their packs. Taemin issued sidearms to the military personnel, despite not knowing if their weapons would work against alien threats. Hyun-woo looked at his team. These people from different backgrounds and specialties would walk together into the unknown. They would represent all of humanity in this moment. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him. "Whatever we find in there," he said quietly, "changes everything. Are we ready?" No one answered immediately. How could anyone be ready for this? But one by one they nodded. They were scientists, soldiers, and explorers. This was why they existed. This was their purpose. As darkness fell over the Gobi Desert, the team made final preparations. Tomorrow they would enter the ship. Tomorrow, they would discover why an alien spacecraft had been hidden beneath Earth's surface for 50,000 years. Tomorrow, humanity would take its first real step into the larger universe. The stars above seemed brighter that night, as if watching and waiting to see what the humans would do next.